Hello, my name is Beck and welcome to like a self-indulgent kind of video because I wanted to talk about all the series that I've either caught up on or I have completed this year, because I've been trying to hold myself more accountable to doing that, because I tend to just start series and then forget about them in the year it takes to bring out the next book, and then I have to start the series all over again in order to remember everything. So I've been trying to get better at reading series. So here is my list of series I have finished or caught up on in 2020. These are also series that might not necessarily have been released in 2020, but I finished them in 2020. So that's what I'm spotlighting here. The first one is one of my favorite young adult fantasies of all time, and it is Spellslinger. Spellslinger is book 1 and Crownbreaker is the last book in the series. I can't remember if it's 5 or 6, but I finished Crownbreaker in January, and I set this specifically in January so that I finished a series before the year really got going. So I wanted to really put that into my goals and hold myself accountable for doing so. Spellslinger is about a guy named Kellen, and in his village, in his town, they really pride the capacity for control and magic. And so it can get quite manipulative, and Kellen is from a manipulative background of his family. So it's quite emotionally abusive, it's quite physically abusive, and he's trying to become a mage and learn the magic system. However, he is not very good at casting the magic despite having all of the knowledge and know-how of how to do so. So he has to kind of bluff his way through situations in order to survive, and that is why I like him, because he's kind of an unwilling hero. He just wants to survive, he just wants to do the best thing possible, and he keeps having adversity and having to face foes that he doesn't necessarily want to fight, but he has to survive in order to do so, and I really like that about it. I also love the aspect of found family in here, and I love that there is an animal familiar. I didn't think I would like that particular trope, but it's pulled off very well in here, because the familiar doesn't like Kellen, and they have this like business partner arrangement rather than a friendship, but obviously it becomes more of a bond later. I really love the series and I really made an effort to finish it in 2020, and so I'm really happy to say that I did it. Also, these covers are really, really pretty. I actually forgot that I finished this series this year, and it's the Amber Spyglass or the His Dark Materials books. It's the Golden Compass trilogy, and I know they continue on after the last book in that series, but I didn't want to continue on. It's a series that I didn't pick up as a kid, and it sounded interesting. It had all of the things in it that I would love. Like, it's got kids who go on adventures and quests, and there's awesome world building and magic, and each kid has a demon that can shapeshift, and it's very specific to their personality, and after they reach a certain age, the demon is like fixed, so it doesn't shapeshift anymore, it stays to that same shape, and kids start going missing. And Lyra, the main character, who is an orphan raised by the church, she's like, what's going on here? And she kind of gets herself involved. So that's from book 1, and it has parallel universes in it. It's got magic. It's got really cool lore, and I'm really happy that I finished it. I listened to it on audiobook as well, and because it's for kids, it's got tons of different narrators. So I mentioned it in my audiobooks for beginners video as well. So it's a good one to get into if you want to get into audiobooks in general. But I really liked the audiobooks. I didn't love the stories. They got like 3s to 3.5 stars from me. So I don't really want to continue, but I'm really happy that I finished them. And then next I finished, well, these aren't in any particular order, but next on my list, I guess, is Battleborn by Amy Kaufman. I have a trilogy review for this and it's spoiler free. So if you want to learn more about the series in general, I'd visit that video instead, because it's been a little while since I've read these books, so I don't have the same know-how that I did before. But this is a middle grade series by Amy Kaufman. She is a popular international author. She's Australian, but she's got a bunch of books published overseas as well. So one of them being the Illuminae files, and then also a few books that she's co-written with Megan Spooner, books that she's co-written with Jay Kristoff, and this is her solo middle grade series. So I quite liked it. It has shapeshifting in it. Again, I'm really happy that I finished it, and I gave these higher than 3 stars. I think I gave them 4-ish stars each, but I liked them. They were good, they were fun, they had great diversity in them, and they had a really great strong sibling bond at the heart of them as well. And I like middle grade because it tends to go down that road of having quests and having friendships rather than necessarily pushing them into romances, because they're too young to get into romances. So it's refreshing to explore the friendship angle instead, and that is something that was really strong in this series, and that's something that I really loved from it. So again, happy that I finished that series, and it was one that had the most recent book in the trilogy come out this year as well, so it was one that I kept up with and also finished this year, which I'm really proud of. Oh, next is one that I didn't like that much, and I read this in a vlog actually, and I have a spoiler Goodreads review about the things I didn't like about it, so if I remember I'll link both below if you want more information. But Jay Kristoff is the author, and he's an Australian author that I really love because I really loved Nevernight. I know that's a very polarizing book, but I personally adored it. And then I read Lifelike and Deviate Deviate, the 2 books in his steampunk young adult dystopian book, and I got a real sense of the setting. It felt grimy and gross when I was reading it. It felt oily and greasy. It had such character in the world, which I really liked. It was just the characterization and the tropes that let it down for me. And I know when I go into YA, I tend to say, oh, it was very tropey. And I generally do expect that from YA. I expect it to fall into tropes, but I also expect characters to kind of push at the boundaries of those tropes and do things that I might not expect. And that didn't really happen in this book. The characters, to me at least, felt like they didn't go in line with their characterization. They just did things for the sake of the plot, and that's what really frustrated me. And so that's why I gave the last book in the trilogy like 2.5 stars, I think, from memory. I didn't really love True Life, unfortunately, and I've unhauled that series since. It's just not a series that's for me. Actually, I think I kept the first book because it's signed to me, but I got rid of the rest of them. I could be wrong. Maybe I kept the arcs. Either way, I kept something and got rid of the rest. So yeah, that was really my stance on that series. Because it's J. Kristoff, I really wanted to love it, but it just rubbed me the wrong way, so I got rid of them. Next is one of my favorite books of all time. So I read The Way of Kings, I read Words of Radiance, I read Oathbringer, I read all of them again, and then I did reviews for them all. And then I did that in preparation for Rhythm of War, which came out in November. And I have been raving about this on my channel, so it's not really a secret that I loved this book. But I finished that. I did a spoiler vlog, a spoiler-free review. I've sung my praises for that book, and I've kept up with the series. Not only did I keep up with the series that each book is 1,200 to 1,300 pages long in each installment, I reread the books before it. So I think I did pretty well with that part. I'm really proud of that, actually. The most I took to read one of those books was like 6 days. So I really just got a hunger and demolished all of them, which is nice because it buffs out my reading goal for the year. It really added to the pages I read this year, which, you know, I'm quite proud of as well. And I think I'm going to say I'm quite proud of this after every book that I finish on this list, or every series I finish rather. But it's no less true each time I say it. I'm really happy that I managed to reread all of them. And I'm also probably eventually going to reread Rhythm of War as well, but I just don't know when. Maybe next year, but I don't know if that's too soon. And I don't know if I want to reread the books before it again before I reread Rhythm of War. It's all kind of up in the air. Also, I read Dawnshard, and that is a novella set between Oathbringer and Rhythm of War. So I read that as well. So not only have I kept up with the main books in the series, I've also kept up with novellas in the series. So I think I kind of hit that one out of the park. Hello, it is Editing Beck here, and I'm just popping in because I can't believe that I forgot to tell you about this series, because I definitely finished it this year and it was even on my list. I don't know why I forgot to include it, but it is the Diviner series by Libba Bray, and this is a quartet of books, and I finished the last book, King of Crows, pretty much as it came out, and I listened to all of these on audiobook, and they're very enjoyable in terms of character, and they just expand in each book. So in the first book, our main character, I can't remember her name now because it's been so long, and in audiobooks the details fall out of my head after a while because I need to see them written and absorb the noise in order to learn them. So the first book follows a character who says something that is a bit untoward even though she's completely in the right. This is in the 1920s, so she's not looked on favourably because she's a woman, I guess. And even though she's telling the truth, she cops the ramification of that. So she gets sent from her family home to live in, I think, Chicago or New York with her uncle, Will, and he runs a museum of the supernatural. So when she gets sent away, she's obviously in this new place. She's got this clairvoyant ability that she doesn't really talk about, and that ability is to touch objects and read their histories. So she can do that. She's kind of keeping it a secret at the same time as she's kind of trying to build this new life for her and not really gelling with it. Her uncle is exploring supernatural murders, or murders at the time, and there's also a few other characters that have different clairvoyant abilities that we get to see the different perspectives of. So those perspectives only grow because we get introduced to more characters as the series kind of snowballs, and by the end of the series I actually really enjoyed the last book. Even though I know some people haven't really loved it, I still gave it a 4 and I really enjoyed the reading experience. All of these characters to me felt very unique and dynamic, and I really liked their interactions. It felt fulfilling. So that's why I wanted to include the series, because one, I really enjoyed it, and two, I think they're great as audiobooks, so they're well worth consuming that way. So now back to Past Me and better sound, because I actually used my shotgun mic instead of my camera's external mic for this video. So I'll see you later. And then we come to a book that was the last in, I guess it's saga, because Rick Riordan has written the last book that is in a long-standing series in his Percy Jackson world. I believe, I didn't know it at the time of filming my reading vlog for Tower of Nero, but I believe he's going to revisit that world sometimes in maybe a standalone or two. So the questions I had after finishing the Tower of Nero, which was the last book in the Trials of Apollo series, the questions I had in that are potentially going to be answered later, because he left a few threads open. I mean, he closed the book, he obviously tied off loose ends, but he left a few little nuggets in there, and I was like, sir, are you doing this on purpose? And he very much was, because I found out later that he's going to write more. Not long-standing series, because I believe that these series have taken a lot of time up in his life. So it's kind of a long-standing saga that's come to an end, and I'm really happy and just really grateful that I was on that ride, because I read Percy Jackson like 10 years ago, maybe even more actually, from my school library, and I've since bought the books. I now own them, and I just really love rereading them. They've got a lot of nostalgia for me. That's another series that I finished, but I feel like it has a lot more weight than some of the others on this list, just because it's been going on for so long. The next one isn't a series that is complete, but it's a series that the first book in it came out in January, and then the sequel came out in like September, I think, and that is The Age of Madness by Joe Abercrombie. I don't own the second book, but I listen to these on audiobook and then I buy the physical book afterwards. So the physical book will be coming to my shelf soon, but I did read it, I promise. This is a book that is in his continuation of the First Law. So The Blade itself is the First Law trilogy, book 1. So you can either read from book 1 and read like 10 or 11 books and then start this, or you can jump straight in at this point. After the First Law trilogy, he's written a few other books that are kind of considered standalones, but you might need prior knowledge if you want to know a vast context. So all of his books linked together. This one was no different, and I started from the beginning and read all the way through, so I had all of the knowledge of the characters. And so when I read this, it was very fulfilling for me, and I love Joe Abercrombie's writing because it's just so rich with character, and he writes in characters' voices that are so distinct. And if you know me and you know my reading taste, you know that I'm a huge character reader, and while I do love an awesome plot, because who doesn't like being surprised by plot twists, I love amazing characters that will in turn surprise me as well. So when a plot and a character work together and they both surprise me with key things in the story, that is when I'm obsessed with a book. And I gave this 5 stars, and I read it in January, and I read The Trouble with Peace, which was book 2, and I gave that a 5 stars as well. And so the next book comes out next year, and I'm very much keeping up with this series. So this is a book that I've had on my radar, or this is a series that I've had on my radar rather, and I've managed to keep up with it. And I read pretty much all of Joe Abercrombie's work last year in preparation. So for that, I'm pretty proud of myself, because I did the hard yards and I managed to get to this point. And now the next series is a post-apocalyptic series, so a little bit topical for COVID. I don't know if many people would really pick up apocalyptic books during this time, but I decided to, because that's just who I am and it's a genre that I love anyway. So I read the Road to Nowhere trilogy. It starts off with the Book of the Unnamed Midwife, and obviously in the title she is unnamed and you don't really know her name throughout the entire book. She adopts names as she goes depending on what situation she's in, but this is very much focused on a woman who is a nurse, like a midwife obviously, and this virus hits that kills off a lot of our population, and the remaining is mostly men, because men have more of an immunity to this virus than women. So a very small amount of women exist in this post-apocalyptic world. Obviously our midwife is one of them, and she dresses up to convey herself as a man to the outside world so that she doesn't get beaten and raped and assaulted and basically killed for what she is and taken on as a slave and sold off. So whenever she comes across women in this post-apocalyptic world, she helps them out with birth control and she looks after them, and she has to do it in a very nuanced and subtle way so that she doesn't get both of them into even more danger. And so this really follows her story from her perspective in journal format, and also her perspective in more of an omnipotent perspective. So you get her and you get what's happening around her as well. And each book is like a companion / continuation, because it's continued time in this world, so it makes sense to read all of them in order. but it doesn't just follow this character. It follows a different character in books 2 and then a different one in book 3 as well. And of the 3, this one was my favorite. The series kind of went downhill for me, but it's a different kind of style of post-apocalyptic book. It actually acknowledged queer characters, it acknowledged trans characters, and it acknowledged that fear of traveling on the road while also acknowledging that there is community and hope at the same time. So it wasn't a book that was completely devoid of hope. It had respect in it, which I really liked as well, because it really could have gone down that road of villainizing religion, and it was very careful about it, which I really liked, because, you know, it's easy fodder if you're going to convey, you know, a big bad guy in an apocalyptic book. Usually you go with like a religious cult, for example, and that didn't really happen in here, and that's what I really respected. So it's a book that I really love and I would eventually really like to reread. I'm not sure if I'd pick up the other 2 again, just because they're not as much of my thing as the first book, but it's a series that is quite different for a zombie apocalypse book, and so I think more people would benefit from reading it for sure. So that is my recommendation, and I'm going to stop talking about this now. And then next, I actually finished a manga series that I've had for a long time. So I read this like 10 years ago, maybe even longer, when I was in high school, and I picked it up again recently because I wanted to reread it, and that is Fruits Basket by Natsuki Takaya, I think her name is. And this is a contemporary with a supernatural twist. So Toru Honda is our main character. She's a high schooler and her mother has recently passed away, and so she is very content with not being a burden on people, and she will go to the nth degree in order to make sure that everybody else is happy, and she doesn't really look after herself. She kind of has just feigned happiness this entire time to the point where she believes it, and now she's living her life in her best stead, and she's living in a tent in the forest basically, and she stumbles onto the Soma house estate, and the Soma family have a secret, and that is if they are hugged by a member of the opposite sex, they turn into an animal of the Chinese zodiac because of a long-standing family curse. Okay, have you got all of that? Because Toru runs into the family, accidentally hugs one of them because she falls on them, and then chaos ensues. So they let her into the house because obviously she's got nowhere to live, and then she gets caught up in their family politics, and she just forms such wonderful, wholesome relationships with all of them, and I really adore it because it's so funny and cute and adorable. It hasn't really aged super well, but I still really liked revisiting the characters that I initially was fond of and that I remembered, and I believe it's been remade as an anime now because it was made before, but it didn't really follow the manga after a specific point, so you didn't get to even meet all of the Zodiac members in the in the anime the first time around. So now we finally do. So now that I finished reading it again, I can go and watch the new anime, which I'm really excited about. So again, I'm really happy that I finished this one because yes, it was a reread, but I'd forgotten significant details because it was so long ago. So now that I've read it and they all look really pretty on my shelves, and I can feel satisfied because I know that they're not adding to my reading pile and they're just looking pretty and I've read them all. So it's a personal best, honestly. And then I've only got 2 more. So the next one is Hollowpox by Jessica Townsend. And this is the 3rd book in the Nevermore series, or the Trials of Morrigan Crow series, I think is what it's called. Obviously, Hollowpox is book 3, and we follow Morrigan, who in the first book is part of an abusive family in this town. Everyone believes that she's cursed, and so they blame her for everything, and she has to apologize for everything, even though it's obviously not her fault. And Jupiter North is a magician, he's a wizard. He's a wizard, and he takes her through this portal into Nevermore, and he raises her in his Hotel Deucalion, which is full of magical people and creatures and just friends that she makes friends with. That's like a found family scenario. There is a magical school in it, but that's more in the 2nd book. The 1st book is obviously in the title, it's The Trials of Morrigan Crow, so we encounter magical trials. And so I really love the basis of friendship in this book. I really love obviously the basis of found family, and this is a book series that I've been keeping up with because it has the same nostalgia and magical feeling that Harry Potter gave me when I first read it, but it's done it in a new way, and I don't see that balanced in series as often as I'd like to, because when people say, oh, there's a new middle grade out and it's like Harry Potter, I always go, okay, it's compared to Harry Potter like fantasy is compared to Game of Thrones. It's just the done thing, but this actually genuinely deserves that praise, and it's done it even better, I believe. It's also very inclusive of queer spaces, and it's also very representative of people and relationships. It's a lot more positive than some of the themes that I can see in Harry Potter, so I really like how much more wholesome it is in comparison. So that's why I keep up with the series, because I really enjoy it. Obviously, I wouldn't keep up with it if I didn't enjoy it. So It's a book that I look forward to every year. I know middle grade isn't for everybody, but if it is your cup of tea, then I think you'll quite enjoy it. It's very well deserving of the hype, and it's very, like I said, it's just very fun. So please go and read it. And then finally, the last book on this list, I actually talked about them in my November wrap-up, and that is Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. These are a collection of graphic novels. She originally published this as a webcomic, but she is now publishing them as physical books. And so I only got onto this series recently, but my friend was getting rid of the first book just because it wasn't really her thing. And I was like, please send it to me. And she did. And then I read it and I just devoured it. And then I went and I bought 2 and 3, and book 4 isn't out until next year, and I've already pre-ordered it. So this is 100% a series that I'm very keen on keeping up with. The story is about Charlie, and he's gay, and he's been outed by somebody at his school, and he went through rigorous bullying because of that. And it's about him falling in love with this guy named Nick, who is on the rugby team, I believe. And Nick is not necessarily straight, but Charlie thinks he is. So it's a nice exploration of, again, a queer relationship, but in high school with a support network, but also with bad things going on as well that are quite serious in terms of mental health and bullying. So it tackles serious topics, but it also emphasizes support, communication, and healthy relationships, which is something that I really appreciate in a contemporary book, because so often we see books or movies or series that just have not very healthy relationships portrayed in them, not very good communication portrayed in them. And so it's just a nice breath of fresh air when something like this comes along. And that is 100% why I love the series. Also, it's just really cute and it's really fast to read. So I was like, I'm going to up my Goodreads goal. And then I read the trilogy, well, the 3 books so far. So I achieved that, and I'm now really anxiously waiting the next book because I need it now. It looks so pretty and I need it. So I think that is the end of my list unless I read more series in December, but I don't think I will. I think I'm just reading standalones to kind of finish off my to be read pile. So that is my list. Let me know down below if there is a series that you have outstanding that you've been meaning to finish for a while, because I know I still have a few. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'll chat to you down in the comments, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.